Thank you for joining us tonight for tonight's community meeting about design updates to the Northwest Battery Park City Resiliency Project. I'm Nora Madonic. We support public engagement for this effort. Last fall, we shared an update about the project design after the 30% design milestone, and we hosted a series of site walks around that. Since that time, the project team has been working on advancing the design. They've been doing analyses, they've been coordinating with stakeholders, and of course, considering public input. Tonight's meeting will focus on updates that they've made to the Northwest Battery Park City Resiliency Project design. The design update was informed by public feedback collected at more than 24 public meetings, workshops, walking tours, and small group discussions over the past 3 years. To make it easier for people to attend who couldn't be here in person, this meeting is being live streamed. If you're participating in person today, we will have a Q&A after the presentation, which should be about an hour, a little less than an hour, and we'll open the floor for questions and answers. And if you're participating here, a team member will come around the room with a microphone, so that you can ask your question, and we'll see what we can do about getting that answered. We appreciate if you would keep your comments concise. We want to make sure that we can get everybody's question answered, as many as possible. If you are participating virtually, please use the Q&A feature and put your questions there, and we will make sure that they're answered here. We usually rotate back and forth between virtual and in person. If you prefer not to stand and ask your question, just raise your hand. We'll have a team member come over with a comment card, and I would be more than happy to read your comment for you. After the presentation, we will reopen the topic tables that are outside, and you can have some more time to chat with the project team. So let's get started. So we're going to start with Raju Maan, who is the President and Chief Executive Officer of BPCA.
Thank you, Nora. Hello, everybody. What's going on? I got a fan here. That's great. Thank you. It's always nice to get a little clap. Okay, so in the spirit of being concise, I'm going to run through a quick little bit of context on why we're here tonight, a little bit of work we're doing around resiliency, and then turn it over to the team to kind of walk through the details of the design and update you on construction, and then hopefully give us time to have Q&A and get back out there and have some more questions answered. But first of all, thanks for being here, and we appreciate your time. Thanks for coming out on a hot evening. It's great to see the AC is really pumping in here. So hopefully you're all comfortable. Okay, so here's the agenda. We'll run through this presentation I just described in brief, and then we'll do a Q&A and get back out there and answer questions. So why are we here? I think most of you are pretty familiar with the recent history, but I think it's always important to frame this conversation right at the outset with the urgency of the challenges we face. Everybody obviously remembers Sandy quite well, but the risks are only growing, and we can see this, I think, with the wildfires last summer, obviously with the heat today, with the heat around the world. Climate change is here. It's very real. It's impacting Lower Manhattan as we speak. And so we have to struggle to adapt, and not only adapt to climate change, but try to build a better neighborhood in the process. So that's what we're all, I think, trying to set out to do today. And we also have to not only think about it in terms of sea level rise, but in terms of rain and extreme heat as other important factors in thinking about adaptation. So here's the snapshot of where we are today and what this plan hopes to address. You can see, with the numbers on the left of the screen, the number of residents here in Battery Park City, but also just east of Battery Park City in Tribeca, 25,000 people, a significant collection of really important institutional stakeholders like the Borough of Manhattan Community College, like the World Trade Center, the collection of buildings and the transportation underneath it, the Museum of Jewish Heritage, on and on. So really, obviously, a hugely important part of the city's economy with an incredibly important collection of institutions we're hoping to protect. And it comes in the broader context of this effort that the city is undertaking, really to look at Lower Manhattan as a connected set of coastal resiliency efforts. And I wanted to give just a moment here for Jordan Salinger, who works for the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice. I want to just flatter Jordan for 1 second before he gets up to say that I think there are few people, and Jordan has worked on all of these projects in different forms, who are doing more and have done more to protect Lower Manhattan's coastline than Jordan. And it's one of the sort of unsung heroes of resiliency work in the city. So I wanted just to sing his praises a little bit and give a little more context on kind of what the city's doing. So Jordan, you want to say a few words? Give Jordan a little round of applause too. Yeah, let's do that.
Well, certainly the first time hero has been in any introduction of myself, so I'll take it. Hi, everyone. Jordan Salinger, Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice. As described, this is a partnership that we've had with Battery Park City Authority for the better part of the last decade. Certainly planning efforts coming after Hurricane Sandy, but in earnest, really 2016 and on, working together on these projects. One quick note to kind of explain the slides here. Ignoring East Side Coastal Resilience, which on its own is a $1.5 billion project. Everything below there, roughly $1.7 billion worth of capital projects in construction, roughly half of these efforts. So the Brooklyn Bridge to Montgomery Coastal Resilience broke ground about a year and a half ago. More recently, the Battery Coastal Resilience, and obviously the work that the authority has done on the South project. So once again, $1.7 billion of funded capital projects. There is more to be done. You can see the call out there for Finite Seaport climate resilience. That is a more complicated effort that we are undergoing, but something that we have made steady progress on. Do want to take a moment once again to focus on the collaboration with the authority. This has been, there's nowhere else in the city where you have all these projects that kind of abut each other. They all work independently and they can advance independently. But for example, there's one drainage system. So it does require all of us working together, and they've been great partners, have the same design standards across the projects, and that's no easy feat. Also want to take a moment to thank all of you for coming on such a warm evening. Could be plenty of other places outside. But once again, the AC does seem pretty nice. These efforts are not easy. They are long-term infrastructure projects. They involve, real back and forth. There's no kind of easy design solution. And like any infrastructure projects, they don't happen overnight. These are projects that will, take a while to construct, but really future generations will truly benefit for those efforts. And, that is not always easy in forums like this. But appreciate all of you having the conversations and trying to make these projects better, because one thing we've seen over the last decade is conversations like these have led to better projects. So once again, thank you for having me.
Appreciate it. Great. Thank you, Jordan, for that context, again, for the partnership as well. So I want to talk a little bit about the history of Battery Park City's work recently. And again, I'll be concise and so we can get into the meat of the presentation. It's obviously a collection of projects that the team here has led, starting with a relatively small effort to protect the ball fields as an early phase of resiliency work. And I think as most of you in this crowd are aware of the project in the southern end of Battery Park City, the South Resiliency Project is well underway and in construction. And I'll show a few slides about that. And then obviously here we're talking about the piece of the Battery Park City waterfront north and west of that. And so it's really a collection of efforts to prepare this neighborhood and surrounding neighborhoods from the effects of climate change. So I thought it'd be useful, just since we're updating folks on resiliency efforts, to show a couple of quick slides on the South project and then really turn to the meat of the presentation on the Northwest. So this is the effort that is underway in the southern end of the neighborhood, as Jordan alluded to, stretching from the Museum of Jewish Heritage down through the Battery itself. If you walk by this neighborhood, you'll see the active construction happening. And we've got some images here of showing sort of what is happening. You can see the pavilion building in the middle rising. You can see the below grade work and some of the kind of complicated and interesting engineering happening to really elevate the park and pull it out of the floodplain. I think we're excited to report that we are continuing to be on budget and on schedule. And so by summer of next year, the park will be reopened and hopefully we can all gather there and celebrate, I think, the work that's been done to get there. Got a couple more images, I think, to show you about kind of some of the really interesting and complex construction work that's happening. So hopefully those of you who are engineering construction nerds can appreciate kind of level of effort and complexity happening. So that's a little bit, just a quick update. Next summer, again, I think we hope to really celebrate with you all the opening of that park, and it's exciting to see it continue to move forward. So the meat of the conversation, I'm going to turn over to Gwen Dawson, who's our Senior Vice President for Design and Construction, who's been really admirably leading the Northwest resiliency efforts to talk through our updates to design. And I think, as Jordan mentioned, this has really been a, we think, great conversation with the community where we've tried to respond to concerns we've received and improve the design all the way. So I think you'll see some hopefully improvements in the design, and then also start talking about construction and what does the schedule look like. That's a much longer conversation that we'll continue to update the community on, but want to introduce sort of overall schedule and timeline so you get a sense of how that might play out. So with that, I'll turn over to Gwen Dawson. Thanks, Gwen.
Hi, everyone. I want to join Raju in welcoming you on this very August-like first day of summer 2024, which also marks the first landfall of the first named storm of this Atlantic hurricane season. Both very powerful reminders of the climate chaos that we're confronting as we advance the planning and implementation of the Lower Manhattan Coastal Resiliency Program and the Battery Park City resiliency projects. As Raju said, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the developments in the design that have occurred for the Northwest Battery Park City resiliency project since the last time we met. I'll be reminding you a little bit about the features and benefits of the project as we go along. And at the end, we'll talk a little bit about the plans for phasing and the schedule for construction, which we're looking forward to next year in 2025. This project, as many of you know, is being pursued as a progressive design build project. I won't go into the details of what that means, but suffice it to say that we believe that this project delivery system will wind up being a benefit to the authority in terms of time and cost efficiency and in reducing overall risk to the authority for the project's implementation. We have members of our team, both our consulting engineer team and the progressive design build team that's headed up by Turner Construction and E. Cruz. So they are the technical experts. I'm not. I will give you some of the updates as we go along, but at the end of the updates, the technical expertise will be in the audience prepared to answer any questions that you have. As Nora has mentioned, we have had a number of community engagements related to this project over the past couple of years, ranging from large meetings to small meetings to workshops, roll up your sleeve workshops, and site tours. So a broad variety of types of engagement, and we believe it's been a very robust program. And as Jordan mentioned, we are firm believers that that kind of engagement and the feedback that it garners serves to make the project a better project. Just to touch on some of the benefits, as you know, we are designing this this project to be responsive to the 2050s 100-year storm, which includes 2.5 feet of sea level rise. We're also anticipating that it will help to provide additional cooling opportunities for heat events and also drainage advantages, which keep the potential ponding of an accumulation of water to a minimum in the event of heavy rainfall events. We also want to make sure that folks keep in mind that there are a number of economic advantages that flow from the project, not the least of which is that with FEMA certification, which is something that is part of the project, the Battery Park City community will be removed from the FEMA flood maps, which eliminates the requirement for flood insurance for federally backed mortgages. We also have taken every opportunity that we have identified to enhance the public spaces as we design the flood barrier system to increase landscaping, something we've been very successful at doing, about a 30% across the project area increase in overall landscaping opportunities, increasing native plantings and also in water habitats. Just to give you a summary of some of the things that we'll be focusing on as the design developments that have taken place since the last time we met. We've got a greater level of detail in the alignment, the engineering and the constructability for the overall project area. We are also starting to focus a great deal on materials for the finishes for the project area and the planting palette. There have been particular advancements in the design for certain portions of the project, overall project area, including the Tribeca Route 9A section, the North Esplanade, Brookfield Place and Pump House Park, South Esplanade Street Ends, and South Cove. To reorient you to the overall project area, it's a very long alignment, over a mile long. This slide is oriented so that the south is to your left, north is to your right. The project begins on the south end at the end point of the South Battery Park City Resiliency Project around First Place. And then proceeds northward along the waterside edge of Battery Park City, across the North Esplanade, and then extends across Route 9A, up the east side of Route 9A to North Moore Street, and then across to Granite Street. Now, the reason we need to do that, even though that's outside of Battery Park City, is that in order to achieve the targeted protection, storm protection, or the design flood elevation that's needed to achieve that protection, we have to find a natural spot where the existing topography meets that targeted design flood elevation. There is not a spot that we could stop the project within Battery Park City. We can't do that until we get across Route 9A and then over to Granite Street, where the natural topography meets our design flood elevation. Starting at that north end of the project area, again, the orientation here is east to the right, west to the left. You're looking at North Moore Street, and then on the right side of the screen is Granite Street. The project ends at that corner, where, as I mentioned, the natural topography achieves the design flood elevation. However, as the project alignment proceeds westward along the southern edge of North Moore Street, the topography falls off. The elevation gets lower. And so we have to pick up with a constructed flood barrier at that point. So the flood barrier at that very eastern end is only about 2.5 feet from the sidewalk level. But as it proceeds westward, by the time it gets to the intersection of North Moore and Route 9A, that flood barrier has to be 9.5 feet tall in order to achieve the very same design flood elevation as was the case on the eastern end of that block. This is a rendering showing the flood barrier system will look upon completion. We're looking westward towards the water along, again, the southern edge of North Moore Street. You can see the flood barrier that exists on the left side of the screen. Again, it has been designed to be on the exterior of the building, but to hug the exterior of that building in a way that makes it look like it is intended to be part of that building, extended building. There's no point in the project area where the flood barrier system is actually integrated within any existing buildings. So they're very separate, but they are designed to be compatible with the buildings. And as you can note here, all of the entrances and exits to and from the buildings are maintained by virtue of deployable means. Deployable means that if there's no storm, it looks like this. If there is a storm event that comes, there would be a gate, or in this particular instance, stop logs that would be placed in that gap to achieve a continuous flood barrier system there. As we're going to change the orientation once more. North is to your right, south is to the left. North Moore is on the right side, and then you're seeing the alignment as it proceeds southward along the Borough of Manhattan Community College on the east side of Route 9A. Now, this may represent a change from the last time some of you saw this alignment, because originally the alignment in this particular section was intended to be on the west side of Route 9A. And it was going to be crossing here just north of Harrison Street. And then it would be proceeding down the west side of Route 9A alongside the bikeway walkway and next to Hudson River Park. However, what we learned in the course of design as the coastal modeling was performed is that the barrier that was required to achieve the design flood elevation was quite tall and was over 9 feet, about 9.5 feet, which was a pretty imposing presence next to the park and next to the bikeway walkway. We looked at a number of different ways of trying to achieve that in a way that wasn't quite so imposing. The possibility of a partial passive and a partial deployable wall, but there really wasn't any way that we could reduce that impact both visually and practically enough to really make that alignment work. So our design team went back and looked at a different alignment to bring it on the east side of Route 9A, where it hugs the exterior of the Borough of Manhattan Community College and proceeds southward from there. It does create the need for an additional street crossing here at Harrison Street, which we're working very closely with the New York City Department of Transportation on. Right now, the proposal is to create deployables in the form of swing gates here that would swing into place and in the event of a storm event, but would not be in place during everyday operation. We're working very closely with the Department of Transportation because obviously the impacts on street operations and traffic have to be very closely analyzed. So we are awaiting kind of a final determination on the acceptability of the swing gates in this location. And then as we go further down, as we cross Route 9A, we are confronted with the same challenge of what kind of a deployable mechanism to utilize to cross that very busy roadway. What is currently proposed by our design team is a series of flip-up gates, which means that in their undeployed condition would be flush with the road beds so that they would not be visible to passersby. However, we must make sure that solution is compatible with the overall standards and operations, maintenance, traffic conditions as these New York City and New York State Department of Transportation's are responsible for, and so we are not yet in a final state of knowing exactly what that deployable mechanism would be. If it's not flip-up gates, if that's determined not to be feasible or viable, then the crossing there would likely also be swing gates. This is a view looking down southward along the east side of Route 9A with the flood barrier in place. As you can see, this is the flood wall that's on the exterior of the Borough of Manhattan Community College facade. The objective, once again, is to make it look like it's quite intentional and part of the overall streetscape here. And we are looking at opportunities and plan for some significant addition of landscaping along this stretch, some additional seating opportunities, and some additional planting opportunities next to the roadway. As we then go into Battery Park City at the North Esplanade, east is to your right, west is to your left. This is the North Esplanade, which is right behind this building, Stuyvesant High School right here. So after we make the crossing of Route 9A, then the flood barrier picks up along the exterior of the school building here. We have to replace this esplanade, the platform here. And because we have to replace it, we're going to go ahead and raise it up, which allows us to then make the flood barrier a little bit shorter than it would otherwise be. So you can see right here, the actual wall height is only about 1.5 feet from the surface of the pathway, and next to it, it's about 4.5 feet from the pathway. We're also looking at, and we have presented to this group and others in the past, some other concepts for what we might do with this North Esplanade. There were some proposals to extend it in certain ways. I think there was a plan that we had called the Wave that some of you may remember, that kind of varied in terms of some additional width that we were looking at creating along this esplanade in order to account for the additional space of the wall, and the landscaping next to it, but also to create some opportunities for long-term adaptability. Adaptability is a very important aspect of this project, and adaptability means that over time, we may learn that we didn't plan for quite enough elevation, or that maybe sea level rise is a little bit more than we had anticipated, and we need to add another foot or two in terms of design flood elevation. So we want to make sure that we are designing this and constructing it in a way that we are able to achieve that higher design flood elevation without starting all over again. So the extension of this esplanade by 6 feet allows us, and the raising of the esplanade allows us to achieve that adaptability over time, both in terms of wave attenuation, which is a very important aspect of flood control, but the opportunity to create some other vertical element along the edge, the outer edge of the esplanade. In order to achieve that, the extension of of 6 feet causes an encroachment of this esplanade into the Hudson River Park River Sanctuary. We have been working in very close collaboration and cooperation with Hudson River Park Trust on a means for addressing that and for achieving that. It is a cantilevered extension. It's not at the water level, but it's over the existing water. So we are in cooperation with the trust, working on an arrangement which may we think may wind up being some sort of easement that will allow us to achieve that extension. And I'll also point out that there's a curved connection here. Right now, that connection between the Hudson River Park and Battery Park City in the form of the North Esplanade is a pretty blunt, sharp right angle. And it's not a particularly friendly area. And so the objective is to soften that a bit, to really kind of ease that connection between those points. And we think that's going to be a real enhancement to this area. I will note that the area on the right side of this is marked out as under development. That's because we're working very closely with Hudson River Park Trust on the appropriate types of finishes and lighting and landscaping, and that's an ongoing effort. As you can see, the environment that results from this design is quite nice, and I think it's one of the areas where there's been a real improvement and enhancement to the public space here. This shows that we have an upper and a lower level plaza. So up here is where the flood barrier system is. There's an upper level to this esplanade that allows for circulation by pedestrians and bicycles, but it also allows us to create this little bit quieter, more contemplative space down next to the water where people can really enjoy just being quiet and looking at the water. As we proceed with east being at the top of your screen, over to Rockefeller Park. I will point out a kind of an interesting feature here is at this area, you don't see a flood alignment here. That's because there is this little area here, which is near the Hurricane Maria Memorial, is actually at a sufficient elevation that the construction of a flood barrier is not needed. So we have a little area here where we don't have a constructed flood barrier. I will also point out that as we have said on numerous occasions in the past, the objective has been to maintain access to Rockefeller Park throughout the bulk of construction of the project. And we are continuing with that. And one of the things that we have pointed out in the past is that we have felt that there might need to be some some drainage and grading changes to Rockefeller Park. So there could be some minor impacts, construction impacts. What we have found since the last time we met with you folks is that we're going to add some drainage components, but we don't believe that any regrading will be required. So that's good news. We won't be having to do that. As we proceed southward along the eastern edge of Rockefeller Park and next to River Terrace, we have to start picking up the flood barrier line, and we're essentially following the same line of the existing stone wall along River Terrace. It's offset a little bit. It won't be right on top of the area of the existing wall, but it'll be offset a little bit, which will allow for some additional landscaping on the east side, and will also allow for a number of the street trees to be retained. So the height of the flood wall at this point, again, picks up at about 1.5 feet from the sidewalk. By the time we get further south, past the ball courts, it's about 3.5 feet. This gives you a sense of the new flood wall that is shown in conjunction with the existing park wall. And sometimes that we get some questions about why can't you just use the existing park wall. Unfortunately, the park wall is not constructed in a way that could serve as an effective flood barrier, and doesn't have the seepage protection underneath as well. So we have to build a new wall. This shows the barrier proceeding southward alongside the east side of the playground, Rockefeller Park Playground. Again, we're about 4 feet here, about 4.5 feet, a little further south. The construction will be happening on the west side of the wall, so the playground will need to be dismantled for a period of time while that flood wall is constructed. After which it will be restored in much the same way that it currently appears, with some potential minor variations. For the area then further south, as the flood wall is threaded through between the Irish Hunger Memorial and the Lily Pond, not much has changed here. We've got a deployable area here, which again, in not when the flood barrier is not needed, will be retained as pedestrian access and with view corridors to the water. And then this will the barrier proceeds southward from there, but it's about 4 feet tall at that point. Looking northward, with the ferry terminal kind of out of view on your left, you can see that a lot of landscaping has been added in this location, and the flood barrier is just kind of barely visible over here on the right. The objective being to really make this a very attractive, aesthetically pleasing area with the addition of the landscaping components. Okay, at this point, I'm going to hand it off to Rachel, who's going to talk to you a little bit about the Brookfield Place.
Hello, thank you. My name is Rachel Wilkins. I'm the design lead with Bjarke Ingels Group. We are the urban designers on the project for a couple of the reaches where we've split our scope with Scape, who Lee Altman will be following up with us. So here we're going to start talking about the North Cove Marina. And this is the area that is bound by Gateway Plaza, Winter Garden Plaza, and the 300 and 250 Vesey Street buildings. You can also see that North End Avenue terminates into this plaza as well. So here you can see that the flood wall turns the corner of 300 Vesey Street and picks up right where Gwen left off near the ferry terminal. It then continues around in between Belvedere Plaza and the 300 Vesey Street building. We've gone through a lot of trouble to make sure that we're saving as many large trees at Belvedere Plaza as possible. So you can see all of those large trees here where the limit of work jogs in are all going to stay right where they are today. We've also looked at optimizing the locations of the gates in this area so that they either align with where a lot of the building entrances are located, or they align with the street end here at North End Avenue so that we're maintaining a lot of views from the street end and into the marina. You can also see as the FBS wall comes down to Waterfront Plaza, you see this larger opening here. This is where we've located a series of deployables called stop logs, and these stop logs can be removed and stored. And it allows for this really large throughway from this upper plaza area down to the lower plaza area. In this area where there's also a little bit of a grade change from what is existing in there today. So if you think about what is existing there today, you have these higher raised dining terraces, and then you have the pink granite art piece that is steps down before you get to the lower plaza area. This is very difficult for people with accessibility issues to access. And so as a response to that, we've introduced a series of switchback ramps that switch back between that upper part of the plaza to the lower part of a plaza at a 1:20 slope. And a 1:20 slope is something that's very comfortable for somebody to get to just by walking. It's almost difficult to realize that you're walking on a 1:20 slope unless you're really paying attention. And within those little ramps, we've introduced a series of planters and precast benches. This is to add some visual interest to the area. It's a way for us to add more trees, more vegetation, some shade, and some biodiversity. And underneath these planters, we have a series of precast benches where people are able to sit and face the water. Another part of the design that is one of my favorite parts here is a series of stadium seating. And this is starting to piggyback on some of the original program that's happening there today. A lot of times you get classrooms that come into the area and sit, and they'd want to sit and look at the marina. You have book clubs. You also have small scale music events that happen here, in addition to the larger events that happen in the lower plaza, where we've tried to keep a lot of that open space the way it is today so that those events can continue. As we start to go around closer to Pump House Park, you can see that the wall is crossing the entrance to Pump House Park. And in this scheme, as well as with some of the tables outside, we have a couple different design iterations that we were hoping to get feedback from you guys on. In the last public community engagement meeting that we had, we received some feedback about Pump House Park, both in terms of how some people wanted to open the park up. They wanted there to be more visible sight lines from the park to the Esplanade. And then we received some additional feedback from a different group of people that said that, hey, we really like the way Pump House Park is today. We'd like to close it up. We'd like to keep it this kind of more urban oasis. So after we had this meeting here today, please stop by the Pump House Park table. We would love to hear additional feedback from you guys. And then you can see that the wall starts to curve around. We've completely protected the police memorial, which is located right here. And we've brought the wall up a little bit to Liberty Street, where we have a large deployable swing gate that keeps the opening here very wide and very generous. And then it crosses up over and follows the line of Gateway Plaza up until it turns the corner at Gateway Plaza right about right here. And so right now, where this flood wall is located now is also where there is existing retaining wall, and it's pretty much going to go in a very similar location that it is today, but it will be a little bit taller in order to meet the resiliency goals of the project. And so this is an aerial that looks at Reach 5 overall. And another thing that I wanted to mention that I didn't mention in the previous plan is there's currently two big art pieces called the pylons here. Battery Park City is known for a lot of their public art. And these are being protected and celebrated by kind of increasing the step down that is located in this area. So we're making the step down a little bit more wider, a little bit more generous. And then we're also adding a planter with some trees behind it. And then here you can see the various precast planters with the switchback ramps that get you from the lower plaza to the upper plaza and also provide seating opportunities. You can also see that we are protecting very much a large majority of these shaded tree dining terraces that are along both of the restaurant frontages that are in the area. And this is a view that's looking from the lower plaza towards the Winter Garden. Here you can start to see these precast benches. On most of the precast benches, we've added a wood topper just to add a softer material on top of the precast concrete where people are going to be sitting. These kind of wood toppers are also really great deterrents for skateboarders. And then here you can see how generous and large the lower plaza is, where the programming that is happening today will continue in the future. And this is looking back at the Pump House Park. And these are two of the options that we had discussed in previous meetings. And then some of the design development that went in on these additional meetings. So in the top, you can see was the option that we had presented at the last community engagement meeting. And in this option, we had made the opening to Pump House Park a little bit wider, and we had proposed this series of cascading benches that go down to the opening where you have the flood wall that faces the Esplanade and the marina. And the idea behind this was that we knew that we had to remove trees in this area in order for the flood wall to be constructed. So what were we going to do with this area? We thought that it would be nice to have a little bit more of a more urban space where people could sit and look out to the marina and also watch people as they kind of walk up and down the Esplanade. In response to some of the feedback that we got at the last meeting, we developed this second design option. And this is where we start to look at closing up and maintaining the park space as it is today, and also maintaining this kind of more flat lawn without the berm near the front. And so now we're kind of turning the corner from Reach 5 and moving into Reach 6. A couple of the things that you can see in Reach 6 is you can see that the wall of the FBS mostly follows the line of the buildings down along the face. And that's for a few reasons. The first is because we want to keep most of the space that's there now as public space. And the second is because it's much more constructible, and it's a much better practice to build the flood wall off of this raised platform that's over the water. So everything that's here on the outside of this flood wall that follows the face of the building is essentially on platform that has water underneath it. And so you can see that the wall is replacing what is mostly a privacy wall that is there today. So if you walk along South Esplanade towards the back behind the trees, you'll see that pink granite clad flood wall. The flood wall is going mostly in that same location. It'll be 14 to 18 inches higher. And you can see that from these little flood wall tags that we've added in the presentation. And then we're also proposing in all of this area to put back the World's Fair bench that you see there today. This is a big part of the Battery Park design vocabulary. We love them. We recognize them. They're kind of a New York standard design. And so we'll be putting these back here in these little areas where they're pulled off of the path so that people have room to sit, while also people have room to ambulate in front of them. And then you can kind of see these more organic clumps of trees with a lot of understory and a lot of pollinator plants that are a little bit different from what you see there today, right? Like what you see there today is a lot of low boxwoods and low, very manicured shrubs. You don't see a lot of these kind of mid-level understory plants, and then you have these very, very large trees. In order to meet our biodiversity and ecological goals, we wanted to provide more habitat and more biodiversity in these areas. And this is a view from the Esplanade. So again, everything that's kind of following this line and out towards the water is what is there today, and this is going to stay. This is really a main thoroughfare. You see a lot of bikers, you see a lot of joggers. My favorite are the little kids at the preschool who are all little tag teaming on their little hand-holding ropes. And so this is staying the same, and then this is where these little secondary paths are coming out through this thick understory and down to the primary Esplanade. And so this is starting to look at the 3 different street end nodes. So within Reach 6, we have 3 places where the streets come through and terminate into the Esplanade. We have West Thames, Rector Place, and Albany Street. And in each of these street ends, we've proposed a different type of program for people so that they have a different type of space to congregate in off of the Esplanade and off of that secondary path. And the idea of these spaces is to have a place where you can have more of an informal gathering or an informal opportunity for people to sit and read in the shade, or for people to sit and look out into the water. One of the big pieces of feedback that we received at the last community engagement meeting is, you know, we asked people, like, what do people really want to do here in these spaces? And one of the things that people said is, we just want to sit in the shade and we want to look at the water. We also had a lot of moms say that we want a place to sit with our strollers. And so we started to look at these kind of larger seating opportunities and what that means. So at the first street end, which is Albany Street, we've proposed what we've called internally, we call this the yin yang. And these are 2 smaller areas with these semicircular benches. One is slightly higher than the other. Both of them have very nice views to the water. They've been designed so that when you're sitting in the higher level room, you can see underneath the vegetation out into the water. And then in the lower one, you have the lower level room, which is a little bit more protected by shade trees that'll provide some shade in this kind of little more enclosed area. On the Rector Place Street, we're doing what we call the conversation room. We were a little bit inspired by the idea of a 1970s conversation pit, and thinking about how people could congregate and have conversations and kind of sort of face each other in this area. And so you see this semicircular bench design. And we think that this would be a really nice place for people to have a poetry reading, or for somebody to bring out their guitar and have a little impromptu concert, kind of facing people that are sitting on these benches. The idea is to provide kind of this tunnel of shade by planting trees all along the back of that bench. And then finally, we have West Thames Street. And the great thing about West Thames Street today is there's an art piece called Sitting Stance that is much loved by the community. And some of the feedback that we received was, hey, we really like Sitting Stance and we don't want to see it removed from the project. And so we received some direction to start studying, hey, maybe this could belong in the street end node here. And we actually found that each of the pieces fit pretty perfectly, and they provide these kind of weird, interesting, different design opportunities for people to sit and climb on the furniture and look out to the water. So that's been what we've gone with in this last node. And then I will turn it over to Lee with Scape to continue with South Cove. So this is the user pointer.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lee. Thank you, Rachel. So we're almost done through our tour of the project site. We're at the South Cove, or part of the South neighborhood. And you can see the flood wall is turning the corner around the Regatta condominium from Reach 6 or the South Esplanade and turning inland. We are following with the alignment the existing privacy wall at the corner of the Regatta where the Montessori school is now, and then continuing along the building facade, along the line of the changing grade where there's steps separating the restaurant area from the Esplanade. In each of the street ends in this area, so South End Avenue, Third Place, and Second Place, there are deployable gates that would be closed in advance of a storm event, but the streets obviously are maintained open, unobstructed, maintaining the views toward the South Cove and the water. Moving inland from the Regatta, the wall, the flood wall turns the corner near the Cove Club building and then continues to the south alongside the existing privacy wall. And so in this area, the existing privacy wall remains and the flood wall is built just outboard of it. So we're not impacting any of the existing courtyards associated with the buildings at the Riverwatch building and the South Cove Plaza building. The height of the wall here varies quite a bit. And so when we're starting at the corner near the Regatta, sorry, I can barely see it from here, the wall is fairly high. But as we go further inland toward Third Place, we can lower the elevation of the wall because we are farther away from the water and subject to less wave impact. And then finally on the south portion, just immediately south of the South Cove building, we are tying into the South Battery Park Resiliency Project, which continues from here and protects the rest of Battery Park City. A few other things to note here is that along the Regatta, we have partial height openings in the wall to maintain some views and air circulation between the building courtyards and the Esplanade. Those have deployable gates as well that slide up into Plant Place in advance of a storm. Another thing, so in this area, we've heard a lot of really good feedback about specifically the corner pergola. And so we are preserving a portion of that pergola, the portion that faces the water with the benches so people can still sit in the same location and have the expansive views out into the harbor. I should note that during construction, the pergola will be removed, but then it will be reinstalled in that same location. So we have a view here looking from the South Esplanade south, so you can see the portion of the pergola that is being preserved with the vines, with the benches overlooking the water. Again, as Rachel noted, you can see the existing World's Fair benches remain in place, so that edge experience is maintained as it is today. So I also have the job today of reporting back from some of the conversations that we've had out in the hallway. So I'll start with the table that was focused on tree impact. Let me just get my notes. So there is obviously a lot of heartache around the loss of trees in this area. If you've been coming to these events for a while, you know I share that pain. We've heard, well, I will also say it is extremely powerful right now in this moment with the heat dome that we're experiencing. And of course, if there was a way to do this project where we could protect Battery Park City and Lower Manhattan from storm surge, from wave impact, and from heat all at the same time, I promise you we would do it. Unfortunately, in order to protect from the first two, we do have to impact and remove some of the existing trees. And we are working very hard, the entire project team, to minimize that impact and to remove as few trees as possible and to plant as many trees as possible. We are planting more trees than we are removing. And we do have more detailed information at the tree table for each of the reaches, which trees are being removed, which are staying. We also have views, and you can see an example here. This is something that we've heard requests for a number of times. And so we're showing, we're showing views of the proposed condition at about 5 years from the completion of construction. So you can see some of the trees that are younger. And then again, on the bottom, it's 10 to 15 years from the completion of construction. And so you can see how the trees grow, the existing trees grow as well. We have one of these for each of the reaches. Please come and look at them. We've had a lot of conversations today in this reach, especially, in this table, especially on the South Esplanade around Gateway. As Gwen mentioned earlier, there are areas where we do have to replace the platform, elevate the platform. That is kind of a necessity of the project. It does have a significant impact on trees in this area as well. Right next to the tree table, we also have an area that's focused on green infrastructure and habitat and biodiversity. So we're showing some of the green infrastructure strategies that are employed in the project, including pervious paving, including high capacity or high function rain gardens, which we are very excited about. The other half of the story here is habitat and biodiversity. And we're actually very fortunate to have a lot of data and analysis that BPCA has already developed that is guiding the planting strategy of the new trees and new planting that is going to be developed as part of the project. And so we're looking at the diversity of ages, sizes of trees that we're planting, species, and really working to maximize biodiversity and habitat value for the new landscapes that are being created. Finally, we have an area that's looking at the proposed material for the flood barrier wall itself. This is the first time that we're introducing this. What we're showing here is an integral color concrete that has a pattern created by a form liner. This is something that we're still studying, and you're seeing kind of the first iteration of, and we're really looking for input and feedback. We have heard that folks want to see a sample to understand what the material would feel and look like. That is great input. Again, I would invite you to continue the conversation once we're done with the presentation here. We are also showing the range of kind of special benches or seating opportunities, materials in general that are being proposed as part of the project. We have heard here that there is a lot of appreciation for the existing palette, these World's Fair benches, the pavers, the rail.
I just beg your indulgence for another little bit because we're going to change topics and talk a little bit about construction. And I think that there are a lot of folks who will want to hear, and I'll try to do it as quickly as possible without rushing too much. Okay, apparently we are up again, so we're on. The live stream is on. We just to go forward, we've got some additional design work that takes us from 60 to 90%. There are a number of things that are involved in that. I'm not going to spend time on that right now. I do want to mention briefly the project, one of the project elements that we haven't really featured in terms of the design at this point is the addition of a pump station that's required as part of the drainage plan for the project. This is a project element that came into being farther into the project as design was developed and as interior drainage modeling was done. But just to point out, the location of where we anticipate that being is in the plaza just east of Stuyvesant High School. It will be largely underground. So although there will be construction impacts, once it's completed, it will be largely underground with limited surface expression that's limited to some electrical components and some venting equipment. That project element is part of the project, but because it started later, it will have its own design timeline that we anticipate will run from January of 25 through February of 26. It will begin construction later than the rest of the project, but we anticipate that it will be completed at the same time. Okay, so now we're going to switch gears and talk a little bit about construction, because it's only been in the past several months that we've had enough information about the design and to be able to really start formulating some strategies around construction and the construction phasing for the project. Just to talk a little bit about the objectives that we have, we want to be able to complete the project as quickly as possible with as limited disruption as possible. And that allows us to avoid delay in achieving the flood protection that we're trying to achieve. Every time June rolls around and a new hurricane season starts, we are feeling that we are operating on borrowed time. So we want to get it in place as quickly as we can. We want to shorten the overall duration of the construction impacts to the community and contain project costs by avoiding unnecessary cost escalation, because the longer the project goes, the more it costs. We will be beginning construction of the Northwest project after Wagner Park has reopened in the South project. That's something that was important. We want to make sure that we have that public space, that park available and accessible before construction starts in earnest on the Northwest project. So aside from perhaps some limited utility work or some early work that's very limited in scope, that construction will not begin until after Wagner Park has reopened. Want to make sure that we've got open spaces throughout construction. We want to sequence the construction to accelerate protection of the highest risk areas first and to allow for continuous stretches of space that can be reopened earlier. And of course, very importantly, we want to maintain very close and very open and regular communication with the community throughout construction. I'm not gonna stop here, but we've got obviously some very significant constraints and limitations on the project. One that I will mention, because it does impact directly the duration of the project, is the bridging structures that are required in the Brookfield Place area, because that area underneath has an enormous amount of utility work. And also is the location of the PATH tunnels that are operated by the Port Authority and the PATH trains into and out of the World Trade Center. So we have to bridge over those tunnels in a way that allows us to maintain a continuous flood barrier system, and that is an extraordinarily complicated endeavor. The overall construction duration that we anticipate for the project is approximately 5 years. Again, that's based on the information that's available to us now. That may change a little bit, and we expect it probably will between now and the construction commencement, but that's our best estimate at this point, and that is driven largely by the duration of this area that I just mentioned at Brookfield Place. That area in and of of itself will take about 5 years to complete because of the extensive amount of complexity involved. As you can see, the other portions of the project don't take that long. There are some areas that we are looking at starting earlier, and some areas that we're putting up and starting a little bit later so that we don't have everything under construction at the same time. So let's look at the map to see kind of how this progression will work of construction. At the start of year 1 of construction, we're going to have the areas in red represent construction. So we're starting at a little area around South Cove on the South neighborhood, a portion of Brookfield Place, North Esplanade, and the Route 9A Tribeca area along North Moore. Why are we starting at these locations? Well, we're starting at Brookfield Place because that is the longest duration, so we need to start there in order to be able to finish within that 5-year period of time. We're starting up here the North Esplanade and around Tribeca because that is the area where there is the most immediate vulnerability. For those of you who were around during Superstorm Sandy, you recall that there wasn't as much flooding on this side of Battery Park City as there was on the east side of Battery Park City. And that was because the 2 lowest points adjacent to Battery or within or adjacent to Battery Park City are at the south around the Pier A area and at the north up here right behind where we are right now at this corner. That's where the area was breached by floodwaters that ran down West Street. So we want to get this area protected as quickly as we can. And finally, we're starting down here at around South Cove because this area, this total area in the South neighborhood is also an area that's not going to take as long. It'll be relatively shorter duration when compared to some of the other portions of the project area. So over time, we believe that we can get the South neighborhood section done and provide a continuous completed, reopened area sooner. So we're looking at starting at those locations. Start of year 2, you can see we are expanding portions into other portions of the South neighborhood, into more of Brookfield Place. And we're still working here and along the North Esplanade. We have expanded the area on the north end to the Route 9A frontage. In the middle of year 2, we are actually starting to already see some things reopened. So down around adjacent to South Cove, we've got this area reopened and a portion of the South Esplanade reopened as well. We have the rest of it under construction, as well as all of Brookfield Place and the majority of the area on the north end of the project area. At the end of year 3, we're starting to see quite a bit that is reopened. So at the end of year 3, we've got the entirety of the South neighborhood reopened. Now that then means that we have a continuous flood barrier system in place from this point around Gateway all the way south through Wagner Park, across Pier A, and over to State Street. Continuous system in place. We also have the North Esplanade completed and the bulk of the area that abuts Tribeca, Northmore, and Route 9A. At the end of year 4, we've got all of the South neighborhood. We've got a significant portion of Brookfield Place. And we've got the North Esplanade and Tribeca area opened. And you'll notice this is the point at which we begin the construction in the North neighborhood. Up until now, there hasn't been any construction that's actually begun here. And then at the end of year 5, we've got everything reopened. Wanted to highlight that during the course of construction, there will be a lot of open spaces and parks that will be accessible during construction. And I mean, you can see from the south here at the Battery, that will reopen 26. We'll have Wagner Park, Rockefeller Park, and then a number of other open spaces and parks that will be accessible both within Battery Park City and in areas adjacent to Battery Park City. We have a very strong commitment to ongoing communication during the course of construction. We will have a structured set up for how we maintain regular communications with the community, and we'll provide frequent construction briefings and resources available for continuous updates for the community during construction. We'll mention that one of the tables that is out in the foyer relates to the potential for some different uses of temporary open space during the course of construction. We know that there will be inconvenience. There will be some areas that won't be accessible for a period of time. So we're interested in hearing any ideas that you have. We've got some maps outside, and we'd like to understand if there's some things that may appeal to you or seem like good ideas with respect to events or programming or ways that we could utilize existing spaces to allow for more opportunities for enjoyment of the neighborhood. That this feedback will continue to seek and solicit for the next couple of months. So there will be an online opportunity for you to continue to weigh in with ideas on this up until Labor Day. We will be continuing to have smaller meetings and one-on-one meetings with the buildings, the owners, management, residents, and residents of buildings that are along the alignment. There are 17 of them that are located along the proposed alignment. So we will be having conversations and opportunities for interaction with all of those buildings in the coming months. You'll have plenty of additional opportunities for public engagement. This is not the last time that you'll be asked for some feedback on some certain points, nor will it be the last time that you'll be able to weigh in or see or interact with the project as it proceeds through a number of different stages into 25. That's it. So now we're at a point where I'm going to turn it back over to Nora for some Q&A.
Thank you, Gwen. Could I get my team pal here? So Caroline Ibarra will walk around with the mic. For those who are in the room tonight, she will bring you the mic and you can ask your question. If you prefer not to use a mic, we can bring you a card and you can write your question down. I'd be happy to ask it for you. I'm going to be bouncing back and forth between our virtual friends who are online. We have close to 60 people online, so we have lots of questions that are coming in. And I do want to say that questions that we don't get a chance to answer tonight, the likelihood is we won't answer all of them. There are many. We will be doing a Q&A as we have done in the past, and we will post that online. So let's get started. I'm going to start with a combination of two questions that were asked online. One is, if deployables are placed in front of 80 North Moore, how do emergency personnel provide aid to residents inside? And a partner question with that is, am I understanding that emergency vehicles would not be able to cross that line during a storm that deployed the system, thinking of the need for ambulances during Sandy?
Thank you. Hi, I'm Peter Gluss. I'm one of the engineers on the project with Arcadis, and so I'm going to answer that first question. So it's a good question. So there's a number of different interventions prior to a storm that have to be scheduled before the rainwaters and the surge comes and actually contacts the authority's property. So there's going to be a detailed plan that's going to be developed, and in that plan, a number of these different elements are going to be triggered at certain times. So if you can imagine, Lower Manhattan has closures on the east side with the East Side Coastal Resiliency for the FDR. They have closures for the Battery Underpass, and they have closures for 9A that's in front of us. So that's a sequencing need. So the city's working on a plan to figure out when those closures occur. Those are the large closures. On the authority's property, there's a number of other closures that have to take place, and they're all going to be sequenced in order of criticality and importance. The particular closures on North Moore are likely going to be the last closures to be made, because these egress points want to be left open so residents can move in and out of the building prior to a storm. However, having said that, again, this plan has to be coordinated with the city, because it may be the case that the city has evacuation rules at this point. So there's a lot going on prior to a storm. And so the authority is going to develop a plan that governs all these different closures in conjunction with the city's plans that governs the emergency response for all of Lower Manhattan.
Okay, let's take somebody from the floor. Caroline.
So the question I have is that we're dealing with all the things that are happening in the Battery and by Northmore and so forth and so on. So if we were to have another bad storm, where does the transit system fit in with the subways? Because they had gotten tremendously flooded, and do they play a part in this whole project at all?
Thanks for the question. So there's obviously a lot of coordination, as Peter was alluding to, that's required with all government agencies that would be affected in a storm event. So as Peter mentioned, really the city acts through the Office of Emergency Management as kind of the central coordinating entity for pulling together the agency puzzle pieces in the event of a storm surge, for example, and making sure that if evacuation procedures are in place, that the MTA system is up and running so that people can safely evacuate. So it's really the city's Office of Emergency Management that acts as a kind of a coordinating hub to help agencies make decisions at the time of a particular storm event.
Okay, just hang on for a second, Caroline. I'm going to go back online. And I'm going to read one question from each questioner. There are many people who ask many questions. I just want to make sure everybody gets a turn. Regarding the Rockefeller playground water elements, which are beloved by children using the park, will they be returned as is in the same location or someplace else in the playground?
By Rockefeller Park water elements, I'm assuming that they're referring, yeah, maybe you can respond.
Thank you. The ones that I'm familiar with, there are a couple of hippos. There are water elements that are part of the existing stone wall, and then there is a dodo bird that is also an art piece and water element. Specifically, the dodo bird has some we have some safety concerns with putting it back in place. So we're looking at opportunities to find a different location for it, and to see if it still makes sense to have it operate as a water feature or not. The stone and concrete water features, so the hippos, the ones that are attached to the wall, we are working on finding a place for them within the playground. It may not necessarily be the exact spot, but they will be retained as part of the playground experience.
Thanks very much. First of all, I think it was an excellent presentation. I really thank you. It was great to see that overview of the entirety of it. It was really, really helpful. And I'm on the community board. I know you, and it's really, really important to see the whole. I have a question that comes up a lot. The community is very concerned about the west side of Manhattan. And I'm curious with everyone in the room that is involved in this design as to how you feel you'd like to see the plans that you've created inform the Army Corps, who is now, as we understand it, solely responsible for what comes ahead. And how, in fact, what kind of conversations have you had? And we've talked about this before. You've done this extraordinary work, and it's a wall system, not completely dissimilar to what the Army Corps has provided, right? How would you like to see us go forward on the west side, assuming you, for example, going to get that commission?
Thanks, Alice. It's a very good question, and I know it's something that's been on a lot of folks' minds because we recognize there is a need that exists north of the endpoint of our Northwest project. And we understand that with the HATS study the Army Corps has worked on, there's some question and uncertainty about that and some dissatisfaction with some of the concepts that have been put forth. We certainly have no jurisdiction, we have no authority to proceed with anything further north than the endpoint of the Northwest project. But we would hope, and we've always indicated that we are hopeful that the lessons learned from our project can help inform and can help and aid in the planning of any extension of the flood barrier system that would extend further north. And we're quite happy to be engaged in that process. We understand also that the New York State Department of Transportation is going to be looking at the corridor as well. And so we are eager to be helpful and engaged. We don't have any authority to do anything other than to be a willing supporter and participant in that process.
Thank you. It's not exactly what I was asking. I would look for a little bit more of actually what your vision would be in terms of going forward, but that would probably be more Peter. But I appreciate that answer, and thank you.
Okay. For the area alongside the north side of Stuyvesant High School, the pathway looks terribly narrow for the volume of use. Currently, not a day goes by when I walk or run through there that I am literally brushed by other runners, walkers, and yes, even bikers and skaters. This would make it considerably tighter.
Hello again, my name is Rachel. We're talking about the Reach 2 pathway. So we're actually proposing two different pathways in this scenario. The current clearance of what is there today is 14.5 feet. We're actually increasing that to 20 feet. And in general, that is the minimum width of what we're calling, or what we consider the multi-use path across the project, is a minimum of 20 feet wide. And a lot of areas existing there today, it gets much, much narrower than that. In addition to that, we have an additional 6 foot wide back of rail walk that goes down along where, which is being rendered in wood in this image right here. So there's going to be a total of 26 feet of walking space. One of them is this kind of faster, wider path where you get kind of the multi-mobility, the joggers, and then kind of the slower, more ambulatory path that's closer to the water.
Thank you. Carolyn, why don't you come down right here. Been waiting.
Hi, thank you. So I have two questions. They'll be quick. On the trees, we were talking about it before. Someone had mentioned they're going to try to do 3 to 4 inch diameter trees. I understand that some trees have to be removed. I guess the question would be, in some of the renderings you said there, these are what the trees will look like 5 years after the project, and the project's going to take 5 years. So these are like 10 years and 20 years out. could there be some sort of minimum height trees so the area doesn't look ridiculous when it's all done? I'd like to enjoy it while I can still walk. 20, 30 years out is a tremendous amount of time. And then two, just quick question, I'm just curious, on the west side of the West Side Highway, by the ball fields, they've protected the ball fields. If there's water that runs like down the West Side Highway, is there other things that stop it from coming up into North Battery Park?
Yeah, so the second part of the question was the protection of the west side of the authority's property? It's the east side. Correct.
Over the West Side Highway, if water comes from Tribeca over the
Yes.
West Side Highway,
Yes.
what stops it from coming up and flooding sort of the buildings from the east side?
That's a great question. Yeah. So, I mean, that's why the alignment crosses 9A and goes up to Greenwich. And because the primary pathway for Superstorm Sandy was coming down north and coming up south. So by closing 9A at the crossing we have, and by completing the south project, we eliminate that possibility. Right, right, because so if you think about it like in an exaggerated way, 9A is like a trowel, right? And Battery Park is like a cutlet over here, and the city is like a larger, mound over here. And so by having that trowel exist, by stopping the north and the south part of that trowel, you're protecting both the authority's east side and the Tribeca west area.
Come down Warren Street or Chambers or Barclay, you wouldn't expect it to come water from there. You're expecting it sort of north and south.
For the tree question, that's actually something that we're looking very closely at. One of the interesting takeaways from the analysis of the existing conditions that BPCA did is that many of the existing trees are around the same age, which is natural given the fact that this was kind of constructed all around the same period. And from a sustainability, resilience, biodiversity perspective, that's not what you want. You want a variety of ages for trees, for planting in general, but especially for trees. So what we're looking at is how old or how big are the trees that we're able to keep, and then trying to diversify with the new planting. So the intent is to balance that with areas where we want to achieve the greater shade cover, as soon as possible, where there's going to be a lot of solar exposure. We understand it's not pleasant, especially today. And so we are looking at that. And it's a bit of a balancing act between kind of trying to create a more sustainable environment long-term and trying to achieve the shade cover that would make the space more pleasant and inviting for people to use.
Okay. I'm grateful for all of your work and care on this project. As somebody with graduate architectural training, I understand the complexity and can see how much progress you've made over the past 2 years. 2 questions or requests. Number 1, please retain the urban oasis character of Pump House Park. It is one of the only havens we have in this neighborhood and is a major bird habitat. And number 2, I understand the project staging will be on the North Cove Plaza for 5 years. Is it possible to move it to the southern side of the cove away from the residential area?
Yeah, on Pump House Park, I'll respond to that by saying that the design team is looking at configurations that increase the isolation of Pump House Park. I know earlier in the project public meetings, we presented a Pump House Park that has an edge that was open to the marina. And I think the design team has heard that feedback and now is trying to create more of a sense of isolation consistent with the theme and the original intent of Pump House Park. The second question, about the staging.
Hi, Bill Barton with Turner E. Cruz. And I think the second part of the question was about our staging area in the North Cove. And we'll actually need a staging area in each of the areas. If you can imagine, each area will need equipment and small trailers for the superintendent, for the safety people, for the security, and then they'll need places to lay down materials. So we'll actually have various staging areas throughout the project. And it's a necessity in order to have that adjacent to the construction so that you can build. So we'll do the best we can to minimize them, but they will be in each area.
Okay, I just want to pause for a second. We have a lot of questions in the room. We have a lot of questions online. We were going to, around now, stop questions and reopen the tables. I think we're going to continue with the questions because we have so many of them. If we have a little time at the end, we'll reopen the tables. So I have a two-way. I'm a resident of Gateway Plaza, ground floor with a beautiful view of the water. You're proposing an additional 14 to 18-inch height on the existing privacy wall outside of my apartment windows. It's been unclear how high that will actually make this wall, as per your illustration, that will significantly close us in and obstruct our view so that we will be staring at a wall outside of all three windows. Is there another option for this area? And then part two of this, what are your plans to protect residents during this construction? We are only 300 feet away from the wall in the 300 building at Gateway Plaza. In addition to the dirt that will be blowing into our apartments, many of us work from home, and I suspect the noise will make that difficult or impossible.
So to address the first part of the question, yes, we are doing the flood protection elements replace the existing privacy wall in front of what we call Reach 6. The height differential between what is existing and what is new varies a bit, actually, because in the flat midsections, it's probably less than 6 inches above the existing. As it gets to the gates, it rises a bit to create a bit of a bullnose at each one of the gate corners. So there's a bit of variability in that. We're doing our best to keep that height to a minimum in order to achieve the project's flood protection goals. And we're obviously using that alignment because that alignment is a replacement of an existing wall with an engineered wall designed to resist the loads during the design storm event. In terms of the construction, I'll let Bill Barton answer that.
So the second question was about the impact of construction. And certainly BPCA and their team, we understand that there is an impact with the construction, but we're going to do everything possible to minimize that. You know, we are looking at putting fences with sound barriers on it to help reduce noise. We're also looking at different methods to control the dust, and we'll look at opportunities, you know, as we go to see, you know, where additional sound blankets can be placed. So we understand that's a big impact, and, you know, we're committed to looking at different methods to help. But we all acknowledge that there will be an impact.
Just to add one more thing, part of the ongoing conversations that we're going to be having with each building is to be able to take kind of what is a broader set of designs and dimensions, and then kind of zoom in on the specific impacts or specific elements of the project as it relates to each specific building. So we'll have a little bit more insight into what the impacts may be in terms of the wall heights or construction methodologies that would be anticipated for each specific area.
Caroline, why don't you head back?
Hi. From the south. I'm here from South Battery Park City. I live above 276, PS 276, and I've witnessed the construction and have lived through it for the past year. So my questions for you, I'm here specifically this evening to help my friends in the north. So you can have these questions, and so I hear everyone talking about the dust and that you're going to work on things. We have experienced extreme overcrowding. We have runners, dog walkers, strollers, tourists. Everyone's on top of one another because of Wagner and because of Battery. We have no access to Battery. We have to go all the way around, almost down to Staten Island Ferry in order to get into Battery Park. So we have, for the past year, have no green areas. As everyone knows here, every single tree in Wagner Park was taken down. So we have no tree canopy. That means I've increased my electric bill in AC by this summer by $150 a month. I have to keep my blinds closed because it is so hot by us. Okay, we have temperatures that are 5 degrees hotter than they used to be because we used to have significant mature tree canopy. We have loitering, we have trash, we have dangerous bike lanes. You can't ride your bike over by the Battery because there's tourists, there's no protection. There's no one, you say that there's communication, we've had none. I had floodlights in my bedroom for months when you were working over in the Battery, just streaming in, noise all the time. We have dust in our apartments. My window is not open anymore because of it. So I appreciate what you're saying, and I'm saying that, nothing against the plan, but the reality of it is that it really sucks. It's really bad for us down there, okay? And we're not going to see any of this greenery. I love looking at these pictures. It's beautiful, but I may not be alive for that. That's going to be in 15 years. I'm 54 years old, So what, over 5-6 years, I just can't stress how stressful it's been to live amongst this, okay? It's been a very, very difficult year. I hate walking my dog now. The reason we live over here is for all your green space. We pay an enormous amount of money to live over here. We also are inconvenienced because we have no transportation. And now it's been very difficult. So I'm the experiment, and I'm just sharing it with you. What have you learned from Wagner Park and from Battery Park, and how are you going to make it different for my friends in the north?
Just start by thanking you for your comments. On the timeline question first, I do want to provide some reassurance that this is not 15 years away, that the drawings you're seeing here are, oh, sorry, the tree canopy. Yes, the trees will take some time to grow. There's no doubt about that. I think as Lee pointed out earlier, some of these trees are actually reaching a lifespan right now, and so some of the trees will actually start to, over the next several years, start to die off. So we are replenishing the tree canopy, but understood, the trees will take time to grow. I think these are hard conversations about the future of New York City that we're grappling with, right? That we have very real realities around climate change that we're trying to grapple with as responsibly as we can. And I think, and to Alice's question earlier about what can we teach the Army Corps as they're thinking about the work, I think we've taken a lot of painstaking effort on each block to really think about what is happening on each block. Where are the building entrances? Where's the tree canopy? Where are the play areas? How does the flood alignment respond to each of those conditions to be as sensitive to the reality of what's on the ground as possible? But I don't think we are here to tell you that this is going to be an easy project to execute. It's not. It's going to be a lot of hard work. There's going to be shared sacrifice as we move through construction. But we're optimistic that Wagner Park will be reopened next summer. And so we look forward to seeing you there next summer, which is not that far away. We are optimistic that this is going to be a better neighborhood because it'll be a resilient neighborhood and be protected from some of the severe climate risks we face as a city. I don't think that's an easy conversation for us to have collectively as New Yorkers, but it's a real one, that the risk is there. And so we're trying to grapple with that risk as responsibly as we can, manage quality of life in this neighborhood, which we know has the highest quality of life of any neighborhood in New York City, I think, or one of them. And so we're all blessed to be here, and we take that very seriously, that we have to continue to create a great neighborhood through construction as we think about what interim opportunities exist to improve open space. And then certainly after construction, we really believe this is gonna be a better neighborhood. But
10 years ago, our immediate concern right now is the heat. as you've mentioned so many times, it's 90 degrees out and it's not even the end of June, right? And so while the water will rise, will we all be around to even see it rise with this heat? And we all know, if you're in the environment, you know that we need these mature trees. We need them for our shade. And the more you take away, and there's elderly people here, you have to be honest. I mean, I can't even believe the design in Pump House Park. I can't believe that. That's a haven. And you need to let people know, really, that they're not going to have shade.
Thank you for your comments. Again,
Be honest about that.
on the Pump House Park conversation, again, we encourage you to continue to give us feedback there. We're still thinking through what the design is, so I appreciate the feedback there. We don't. Yeah. I don't think anybody here is not. I mean, I think you heard from Lee, who's the landscape architect from the Scape team. I think we're all, well, just if I can finish my thought. I think we're all very concerned about that reality. I think we'll have more trees at the end of the project than we do today. And these are not easy choices about how do we adapt to climate change in a neighborhood that's as beautiful and splendid from an open space standpoint as this one is. They're not easy choices. And on the heat question, and we'll turn over to the next question after that, we don't have every answer to the risks that climate change presents here. I don't think we present here in this conversation an answer to all of the challenges we face. We think this will be a significantly more resilient neighborhood moving forward. And that's, I think, what we're trying to work towards. But these challenges are very real and they're significant. And no one project can address all of them. But I do want to move on to the next question. So turn it back to Nora.
Thank you. So I just want to say that if you're not talking into a mic, we're not recording what you're saying, and we do want to hear what people are saying. But I'm going to move on to another question. How much in advance of a storm do gates and other deployables need to be put in place? How long does the deployment take, and who's responsible for physically deploying all the items necessary to seal off rising waters? What is the criteria for beginning to deploy or close off openings?
Like I was saying before, the city is in the process of finalizing protocols in a coordinated way for all the Lower Manhattan projects. Generally speaking, when a storm comes up the eastern seaboard, you get about 4 days of good visibility on its trajectory. And I think what we will probably see finalized by the city and its agencies is a coordinated plan that looks out about 4 or 5 days and begins to establish milestones as the storm gets closer and closer to the New York area. And for each one of those milestones, there's going to be a set of activities that are going to take place in a coordinated way around Lower Manhattan. And in terms of the operation of the project, the authority has always said that the authority is going to be operating the project. And one of the components, the pump station, is going to be operated by New York City DEP.
Just to add one more thought to that, with respect to the pump station, that is a portion of the project that will be available, can be available not only for storm surge events, major hurricanes or storms, coastal storms, but also for extreme rainfall events. So we don't always get a lot of notice for extreme rainfall events, but that the existence of the pump station would allow for a faster reaction to that kind of a storm event.
Okay, Caroline, is the gentleman right there. I'm going to give each person one chance to ask a question, and then we'll go back. I want to make sure everybody has an opportunity.
Hi, Bennett Grill here. I'm here on behalf of the Tribeca North Neighborhood Association, which is a group of 400 residents in Tribeca from Franklin Street up to Canal. Louder? Okay, great. So my question, on North Moore Street, that is a very active thoroughfare towards the water and all of the parks. We previously met at the CB1 meeting with a request to evaluate a shortening a narrow, say, of Northmore in the block between West Street and Greenwich to permit a similar space for pedestrians that are using that sidewalk, which would be severely narrowed in the proposed plan. We wanted to request if there was an update on that possibility. Trees, I would say if anyone's interested in backnorth.org, that's one of our most active focus areas and have been working with different buildings to increase the number of trees planted in the neighborhood, but very supportive of that issue. Just wanted to comment publicly, but thank you for your time as well.
Thanks for that question. I neglected to mention this in going through it earlier, but just taking a look at this block of Northmore, we have discussed previously the potential for narrowing the street and extending that sidewalk area, that pedestrian area, and creating more opportunities also for some additional plantings. We are continuing to pursue that. We have a proposal that's pending with New York City Department of Transportation that involves traffic studies for analysis of impacts. But we are actively pursuing that, and I don't know if you want to add anything more to that, Peter. Okay.
Yeah, just as Gwen said, it's under active discussion with New York City DOT, and we recognize the benefits of that, including the increase in tree coverage in that corridor.
Okay, at South Cove, what is the plan for existing lower and upper areas? These areas are maintained by Battery Park Conservancy and are treasured by residents and visitors. Please address the gardens and the blue lights.
I'm always happy to answer questions about South Cove. It's one of my favorite spaces. So the lower level esplanade, the part that is really kind of almost at the water, exactly. Is that Gwen? Thank you, Gwen. That stays the same. That's untouched. It is a fairly low elevation, so there is a likelihood that this area will see more frequent flooding in the years to come. But as part of the project, this was something that was voiced very clearly by members of the public very early in the process. So that area remains as is, including the wood railing, the blue lights, and all of the lower planting components. The upper area, you can see we're trying to really minimize the impact in the South Cove by pulling the wall as close as possible to the existing privacy wall and to the buildings. And so the existing gardens, the existing planted areas that are along the privacy wall on the east side, which is the bottom of the plan, are going to have to be removed in order to construct the wall. But we will be replanting those areas adjacent to the wall and kind of reinstalling all the benches that line that area today. We're also working very hard to protect the existing grove of honey locust trees that separates that upper and lower area.
Are you okay, Caroline? I'm sorry? The mic's not working? Yeah. So I have here, this is handy because we can give you a piece of information. Please make available promptly post-meeting online all information about the cited tree survey for Reach 6 South Esplanade. While it is claimed that this information can be viewed by on-site attendees at this evening's Stuyvesant Tree Table, it should be made an integral part of the public record. I'm going to address RGB, whose comment this is, but to everyone else and to those online, The material that is in the on the table topics tonight is going to be uploaded online, and the activity that people participated in will be available online for those who were not here in person to participate in as well. Want to give it a try? Okay, now let's go around here. Caroline, let's go around. We may have to ask you to step down to the mic. I'm sorry.
Sorry about that.
I suggest you do this over there as well, so people can line up to be heard and you can save some time from running up and down.
Thank you for that.
A couple of questions and comments. I see a lot of, when we were talking about climate change, there's a lot of molded concrete and a lot of walls. We had a presentation from Jordan and the team who on the east side talked about how that is actually not great for climate change because it all retains heat. What I see a lot of in these samples and designs, what happened to all the marble and the beautiful stone that we had? If it's going to be removed, what kind of recycling are you doing to retain that type of materiality in the neighborhood? I heard at one point that that was very expensive to do. I'm just saying that it is what we currently have. It's a materiality that adds character beyond concrete and has a different feel, a different look, a different character. So I'd like to understand why you can't reuse, even if it's difficult to find materiality like that in the whole project, not limited to just Brookfield area, but throughout. When we took stone walls, there was also, that's one. Two, there was a presentation at some point about the walls and a opportunity to have the walls have an arc or a curve on them, which would allow the heights to be reduced in most areas. And the question I have is, why can't that be done throughout everything? Because wall height is an issue for a couple of the residences who have mentioned it. It's also an issue everywhere we're looking, because what we like about Battery Park City is the contextuality that you can be everywhere along the waterway and know that you're connected to the water. You can place make and wayfind if you're walking down the sidewalks on North End and South End Avenue by being able to actually look and see, which will be much more difficult at some of the points you have noted here. You'll be able to look, but you're really not going to see the water as much as you'll see New Jersey on the far side. So how can you lower the walls while protecting Lower Manhattan? Or can you look at materiality to have the top of the walls that frame near the buildings be glass? You're looking at glass in other places, like along the Jewish Heritage area, where you have a stone wall at the bottom and glass on top. Is that an option in more places to be able to create more view corridors? So that was the second part. And the last one is in places that you're removing trees. For example, not only around Pump House Park and around the entire southern, western side of that, but also on the southern end, you're taking trees away from that wall. What can you do to help green it, to have it be more lush, more green in those, not putting a bush 25 feet away, but in the areas that we already like that have greenery? How can we look at different types of greening, whether it's a green wall that is done or some kind of, I mean, we're losing fountains and trees and we are getting protection, but it doesn't seem characteristic or personality of Battery Park City. It seems, no offense to the designers, but much more utilitarian.
Okay, so I counted 4 questions in there, Tammy. So I'm gonna go through the first 3, and then I'm gonna pass the tree one over to Lee. So the first question is about recycling of materials that are on site currently and the finishes of the wall itself. So the design team is working with the authority to put forward a really strong plan for sustainability and for reuse of materials. In many instances, reuse is actually limited not by cost per se, but by storage site and by transportation differences. The authority has a depot of recycled materials and stored materials in Jersey. And, a lot of it is just logistics. How much space do we have on site to take some of the materials, to process them, and then to store them off site for a temporary amount of time, and then bring them back to the site and reintegrate them into the construction. So a lot of that analysis is being done right now. And, we're trying to do our best to maximize reuse while allowing construction to proceed in a way that is untaxed from a schedule perspective by excessive staging due to material reuse. 2, on the finishes themselves, for the past couple of years, we've been showing images of the project, and really tonight's one of the first times that we're actually beginning to show what we're thinking about in terms of finishes. Lee mentioned that to some extent, this becomes more real as you see markups of this and you begin to touch and feel it. I know when we went down to Brooklyn last month to look at some of the markups of some of the form liner work and some of the the dyeing work on the concrete, it really responded quite differently to sun and shade. And so a lot of this has become very much a real materiality thing. And I think moving forward, we'll probably show more of that so that folks can get a better sense of the finishes. But like I said, we're at a point in the project right now where we're looking to finalize the finishes. And so the feedback on the finishes that we've shown tonight is something that the authority and the design team needs to hear. Yeah, the third one is we have optimized the height of the wall to be as low as possible throughout. A significant number of locations on the wall already include that recurve feature. And that recurve feature does tamp down the wave energy and the overtopping. So actually, a large amount of the wall has that recurve built in. We didn't do it universally throughout the whole wall from a design perspective, in part because some of the areas that we did use it for, the wall height was not an aesthetic issue because it was matching existing features. But we can go on the tables and I can show you where we're using that, where we're not using that, and we can talk about how we've minimized the height of the wall throughout the length of the project. And you had a fourth question on trees. Oh, the glass. Yes, the glass. The use of glass in the South project is in a very specific location that is almost as if it's a cove, because topographically, if you looked at the elevation in front of the glass, the way the earth is shaped in front of the glass, between the water and the glass, is protective of the glass. The problem we have is that many parts of our project are really face the water and the full wave heights, and those waves could carry debris. When you take glass and you put it at the top of walls, that glass element does not handle the debris loading that it could be exposed to during a storm event, like a floating car or a floating boat or large floating debris. So in order to make that robust, you have to put a top beam on top of the glass to provide the glass with structural strength to resist that impact load. At some point, the glass has so many beams, it really doesn't look like glass anymore, and it loses the effect of allowing unimpeded, uninfringed, like line of sight through it. And frankly, it begins to look ugly. So we don't have a lot of glass elements because the framing required to handle the impact load has such an aesthetic effect on the glass itself, it's almost not worth it. But again, I can talk to you more about where we consider those glass elements and why we chose not to use them in the tables.
Okay. It feels like the Rockefeller Park and North neighborhood plans are the least firm at this point, which makes sense given it's the last phase of the project. What are the next steps to complete these designs, and when can the community weigh in?
Two areas of the project. The Rockefeller Park and the North neighborhood. Well, Rockefeller Park is in lockstep with the rest of the design as it's progressing forward. So we're right now approaching the 60% design milestone with the authority, and Rockefeller Park is as detailed as the rest of the project elements. So, and the visuals I think are representing that. When, I'm not sure when they mean the north area. I believe that might just be Reach 2. Reach 1 and Reach 2, again, are of consistent design detail as the rest of the project. As Gwen said, the only part of the project that lags design detail is the details around the pump station. And that's because the project needed to do certain analyses up front to understand where a pump station would be located and how large the pump station would need to be. And once those two pieces of information were known, the pump station design began. And that's why there's a lag between the base project, which is the alignments, and the pump station component.
Thank you. Caroline.
Hi, thanks. I want to start with saying I appreciate the incorporation of some of the vitriolic feedback that you've heard before about elements and design. So, I want to acknowledge that. But I have 3 questions. One is, along those lines, thank you for putting in the World's Fair style benches, because I think one of the hallmarks of Battery Park City, both in the north and the south, is the hat tip to the Olmsted and New York style historical parks. So my question is that going to continue in the elements so that we can conserve and retain as much of the beauty of Battery Park City, as opposed to the deviations from park design that we've seen in the rest of the city? I know most of my neighbors that I talk to do not want a look and feel that is reminiscent of the rest of New York City parks. They like it the way it is. And I think a lot of that's just optionality. So the further that we could be retaining that, the better off. So that's one question. Are we going to continue down that road? 2, we talked about adaptability, which I totally support and everybody supports, because a lot of the really sensitive negative feedback about this design comes from 2 elements. One is blocking views of a wall and the separation from the water, which is a key part of the experience of living in Battery Park City. Because we're doing this, and it's doing it with this notion of a 50 to 150 year design flood elevations, which are, by the way, all computer modeled, right? And even as of today, people may not know this, the NASA latest data shows the continuous trend that we've had for 600 years in sea level rise. No change yet, but now we're anticipating it accelerating. Great, granted. But do we need to do it now? If we build it for adaptability, we should be able to minimize the height now with the provision, if we're wrong, as somebody had mentioned, we can add to it later without walling in the neighborhood in anticipation of something that comes decades from now. The third question is, especially on those elements on the south side that really impact on the walls, that you talked about, the community areas at Rector, West Thames, and Albany, which are big differences from what we have today, which is artworks and seating areas. Are we planning on meeting with those buildings and streets and communities that are directly impacted to get feedback about what they want to see? So for example, it looks to me from what I heard in the presentation that the promenade basically is doing it, other than the new wall, the FBS, is not really changing in terms of its resiliency impact. Yet we are taking away the upper walkway, which right now separates the major traffic of bikes and scooters and everything else on the lower to the upper, which might be a good thing, but it's certainly a big difference. And for the people who live there and use it every day, I think they would want to have a strong feedback into what that looks like, because that's a big difference. You talk about on Rector having a community seating area, right? Well, that's kind of news to people, and we have a seating area there now that gets heavily used. So if we have the optionality to discuss with people who live there about how they want it to operate, I would strongly suggest we do that.
Okay, let's try to get to the answer on some of these, okay?
Sure. I think you asked 3 questions. Let me go to the middle one first. The project is working in coordination with the city to establish what we're designing for. And all the projects that Jordan talked about, whether it's from ESCR, down through BMCC, down through FIDI, to the Battery, to the south, to the north, frankly, even the HAT study that the Corps is talking about, and the projects that are taking place in the outer boroughs, we're all using similar consistent criteria that assume a certain level of sea level rise and certain types of still water elevations that's based upon FEMA's analysis. So we can talk more about the criteria in the tables, but the project is using that to be consistent with the city's projects. And more importantly, the project is using FEMA criteria because in order to get FEMA certification, we have to design to a certain standard. And when we design to that standard, as Gwen pointed out, the insurance reductions on all the residential property within the authority's ownership are reduced significantly, which has a perpetuity savings for everybody. So in order to achieve those savings, we have to design to those standards. Your first question was about the overall design aesthetic and the honoring of the Olmsted work versus what we're doing now. I would just say that we've had a lot of public meetings to talk about the aesthetic of the project. To begin to shape the project, the earlier project meetings really were focused on alignment, the nature of the project, the necessity of the project, and really over the past 6 months or so, we've been now talking about how the alignment is being finalized and how the project is going to begin to look. And so all the feedback that you have about how the project is going to look, this is the moment to share that feedback with us so that the authority can take that back and consider that. As I said before, tonight's one of the first times that we're presenting to you the aesthetic of the wall itself, the coloration of the wall, the different types of patterns. We really welcome your feedback on that, and that's the purpose of tonight. And then on the third part.
I do want to add one thing to this point. And I think one of the values and one of the things I appreciate the most about this format and these types of meetings is we hear a lot of different perspectives and a lot of different opinions. And we hear from folks who really appreciate the materiality and the furniture and the character of the space there is now. I had a conversation with 2 gentlemen today who were excited about Pier 26 and Gansevoort and want to see more of that language brought into Battery Park City. And so it's our challenge as a team to try and take all this input, listen to it, process it, and develop a project that, to the best of our ability, tries to make everybody happy. It's hard. We may not be, we may not succeed in making everyone happy, but I do want to note that it's a diverse group and there are a lot of opinions that we're hearing, and we're trying to do our best to listen and to incorporate all of them. Your last point was about the street ends at the South Esplanade.
So I'll address that. I think that you were talking about the node specifically in Rector Place. Some of the things that we were responding to are some of the programmings that go on there today. Right now, it's a pretty large expanse of hardscape. There's not a lot of trees. There's not a lot of shade. Sometimes there's small pop-up events that happen there. And we also were listening to some of the feedback that we got in some of these prior meetings about how people would like to use that space. And so that did go into our considerations when we were starting to look at these little seating area notes.
Okay, I'm going to stay with our online friends for a little bit because we've been sort of front-loading our questions here. I want to make sure that we're equitable about it. I may have missed it, but what is the project's projected start time for construction from the north point of South Cove up to the North Cove Marina?
We are anticipating the commencement of construction in the latter half of 2025. That will depend a little bit on the issuance of permits and our ability to reach agreement with the Progressive Design Build contractor on a guaranteed maximum price. So there's a little bit of float in that that projection, but we anticipate it'll be sometime in the second half of 2025. And we don't have precise month by month timeframes that we can project at this point. As you noted in the projected timeframes that we included in the slides, they're pretty rough. And what we had, I think, projected for that that southern part of the South Esplanade, the South neighborhood, was starting at the beginning, portions of that being completed as early as the end of the second year, and the entirety of that South neighborhood being completed by the end of the third year.
So I've got a question that was asked in this room and also online, both about using barges. One is, will there be an opportunity for delivery of construction materials by barge to reduce truck traffic in Battery Park City? And can salvaged materials be stored nearby on a barge?
So we are evaluating the uses of barges, especially where we have to demo the platforms, which is reach 2, 4, and 6. We're going to price it both ways. In the barging, you have to deliver the materials over to New Jersey, double handle it, put it on the barge and move it over. But it still may make sense, especially to put a crane on the barge to move materials around, or even drive the drill the piles. So we're going to evaluate that in those waterside elements both ways. Secondly, just to store the salvage material on barges would not be cost effective. It'd be much more cost effective to put that in a warehouse.
What measures remove stormwater from impounding on the east sides of walls, on the east side of walls?
Right. So as Gwen had mentioned earlier, the project is in the process of designing a pump station that's going to be located on the plaza area outside of sort of the northeast corner of Stuyvesant High School. That pump station, the purpose is twofold. The first purpose is to maintain pumped dry conditions inside the storm wall when we have surge and rain affecting New York. So FEMA has some minimum criteria about how much water can actually be on the ground within the flood protection system. We're meeting that criteria. And so that pump station will basically be operating when we have surge and when we have heavy rains during heavy storms, and we'll be making sure that the interior of the protected area is dry. The second purpose of the pump station is that, and as Gwen mentioned, extreme rain events, cloudbursts as we now call them, occur with a lot less notice than large hurricanes. I said before, hurricanes, we can probably get a good idea of what's going on 4 to 5 days. Sometimes in the summer in New York, you don't have more than 8 to 16 hours for a cloudburst event. And so that pump station will have utility as well if there would be extreme flooding caused by a cloudburst event, because the pump station is far more easy to activate and put online than the entirety of the flood protection system around Lower Manhattan.
Okay, one more and then we'll get to this gentleman. Where does the funding come from for the project?
So we were lucky this year that the governor and the state legislature agreed to an increase in our bonding capacity, which allows us to put out essentially bonds in the public market and seek that capital to then go build the project. So the state legislature increased the bonding capacity from $1.5 to $2.5 billion. Those bonds are backed by property taxes and other revenue streams, which the private market believes are worthy of a AAA rating, which is what we have. So we actually have debt that's less expensive to issue than the city of New York does, because we've got a very sturdy financial footing. So that's the short answer.
Okay, would you try to limit yourself to one question, please? I want to make sure we can get to everybody.
Well, I have two.
Well,
One,
we could do two.
back up to this gentleman's response. The Battery Park City Authority, I assume, is going to issue those bonds? Okay. Well, if it's a downtown resiliency project, why is the entire cost of the project being put on the backs of the people in Battery Park City? It's a downtown resiliency project. Those bonds are revenue bonds, and they're backed by the taxing authority that you have on the residents of Battery Park City. So why are we footing the bill for the entire downtown neighborhood? Because this will impact the financial district or the FIDI, it will impact Tribeca, it will impact all the people that are not involved in the community here or that bear the brunt of the taxing authority of Battery Park City.
So getting to the Battery Park City finances, so this is a little bit of a longer question, but I'll try to give you a short answer. So the short version is that about 80% of our revenues that we collect in form of pilot and ground rent flow directly to the city of New York. So that's the short version of the story. So anything that we spend here is money that's not flowing to the city of New York. So it's not as simple as to say that it's money that is coming from here. It's actually money that's not going to the city's general operating fund, which is where 80% of the revenue from Battery Park's City Authority goes. So it's a little more of a complicated story. So hopefully that provides a little more clarity.
Well, it provides a little bit, but then there are other agencies within the community, Port Authority in New York, New Jersey, that share the costs of shared projects. This is a shared project. We're protecting downtown Manhattan, right? So you showed that project that goes all the way around to the Brooklyn Bridge and even further up the east side where it's presently, underway now and coming all the way back around the tip. Why are we taking, as you said, 80%? I think it's higher than that, but I'll take your word for it. 80%. Why are we taking the brunt of 80% of the bill on that? Because you're going to issue new bonds at $2.5 billion, which you just mentioned, and that's going to be on the backs of the residents of Battery Park City.
So let me try to explain it a little differently. So if we didn't do the project, we didn't issue any of the...
By the way,
Yeah.
I've been in fixed income and bonds for 30 years.
Great.
That's an exaggeration, for 22 years.
Right.
And I'm well aware of how these bonds are issued. I'm well aware of the people that put them together and everything else. So, I'm not just a novice on this, but go ahead.
No. I didn't assume you were. I wish we had a bond table so I could give Peter's line of, I'll go meet you at the bond table. We could talk about bonds. But again, let me try to explain this in the flip, which is that if we didn't do the project goal, we didn't issue the debt to build the project, that revenue stream, 80% of it would go directly to the city of New York, right? So really what's happening here is that the city of New York, in the form of less money flowing to them, is helping to pay for most of the project. What's back in the bonds is property tax revenue and ground rent. But if we didn't do the project, the money would otherwise flow to the city of New York. Right. So we have to, one of the elements of the approval process we haven't gone through in great detail, but as mentioned on one of the slides, is that, the city's Office of Management and Budget needs to say, we support this project. You can take this money that otherwise would flow to us, spend it on this project to protect this neighborhood. And that's an ongoing conversation we're having with OMB. And obviously they're very concerned about project costs. So that's one of their considerations in thinking about whether to grant approval for that kind of request. So it doesn't stop with us. We can go back to the slide maybe, Gwen, just to show the LMCR slide. Yeah, sorry if I misunderstood the question. That's right. Thanks, Tammy, for So it takes a village to, respond to questions here accurately. So yeah, so the only piece of the project that, as Tammy noted, that we are responsible for delivering, it's the Northwest resiliency piece, right, which you can see in that orange, yellow, and the blue bit. But the rest of the projects are in the process of being designed or funded. Some of those elements are actually not yet fully funded.
Well, I understand that, but if you draw a quadrant in what you're talking about there, right? And you draw a line from the yellow to the purple to the blue to the red and across, that entire wall is protecting the entirety of downtown, along with our neighbors to the right up the east side that are protecting everything in the middle there. You're talking about a group of people taking the brunt of a project that protects all of downtown Manhattan. It's going to protect through to Wall Street, from the east side. It'll protect to, pick Greenwich or something in the middle there. Battery Park City is taking the brunt of that without our neighbors to the right, further west, participating in that.
So we should talk outside. I'd be happy to talk. To you
Okay,
more
fine.
about
I'll take you up on that.
Yeah.
And my last
So,
question
on
was,
table, yeah.
what are the projections on the FEMA that your team has brought up? Because one, we're not really in a flood zone, okay? We're look up the FEMA flood map. The majority of Battery Park City is not in the worst zone. And the cost savings, as far as I can tell, and I sit on a board in one of the buildings here where I'm the treasurer, so I'm very well aware of and I'm also a licensed insurance agent. I'm very well aware of what the costs are for the insurance, and the savings aren't going to be that significant. Not where you've brought it up as a point twice in tonight's meeting.
All right, thank you. Caroline, could you take the mic back, please? Do one of you?
Yeah, so on your question, right, this is a great map that shows, so just to make 2 points. One of them is the project that we're building generally is designed to absolutely protect the authority's property. And there's benefit from the residential strip that's basically east of 9A. You all walk across 9A frequently, you know that like when you get over the 9A highway, it kind of drips down a little bit, right? That topography creates a little bit of a problem for those folks, and this project is a benefit to them. But it doesn't continue around the Lower Manhattan area and over to the east side of Lower Manhattan, just to clarify that. Number two, on flood insurance, I'm not a flood insurance expert. All I know is that the country's flood insurance program is generally considered broken. If we were having this conversation in Florida or in Texas or in the Mid-Atlantic, we'd be probably having different conversations about how much flood insurance costs. We believe the flood insurance is going to be on the rise, and the authority believes that it's a benefit to the project and to its residents to not have to pay those premium flood insurances for infinity because the project will be certified. At some point, those insurance rates are going to kick in.
Okay, we're going to close down tonight, but we have to leave at 9 o'clock for the school to do their cleanup. Thank you very much for participating, and thank you for listening, and thank you for listening to each other. Have a good night. Be careful in the heat.